Good afternoon, and welcome to the Washington Foreign Press Center. Welcome also to our journalists that are in Washington, in New York. We're delighted today to have our Department of State spokesperson, Heather Nauert, to the Foreign Press Center today for an afternoon briefing. She will start with a few opening remarks, and then she will take your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. How's everybody today? This podium's a little tall for me, so pardon me for standing on my tippy toes. It is a real pleasure to be back here at the Foreign Press Center. As I've met many of you, but some of you I have not. And just by way of background, I want to mention to you that I'm a former journalist. This is my first job outside of journalism in representing this administration and the State Department. And I just want you to know how much I honor and value what you all do. What many of you do includes taking daily risks in some instances, on the part of your family, on part of your own personal beliefs to try to get information out to the people all across the world. So I value your work, want to thank you for your commitment to that, and just say it's a real honor to be here with you. A couple pieces of news I want to bring to you before we get started, and let me actually start off with an apology in advance because I'm going to have to leave a little bit early today. We have the Foreign Minister of Canada who's coming in for a meeting with Secretary Tillerson, so I have to rush back to the State Department for that bilateral meeting, so I'll be kind of running out of here a little bit today. But I do look forward to coming back and meeting with you all again soon. So let me start out with something important that's happening tomorrow here in Washington, and that is Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Secretary of Defense Mattis will host Japanese Foreign Minister Kono and Defense Minister Odera in Washington for the first Security Consultative Committee meeting with Japan since President Trump took office. We call it 2+2. The meeting is long scheduled, and it will focus on how the United States and Japan can strengthen their bilateral security and defense cooperation, as well as coordinate their response to the evolving regional security environment. The participants will also review the continued realignment of U.S. armed forces in Japan. The 2+2 is a premier forum for discussing issues related to the U.S.-Japan Mutual Cooperation and Security Treaty, including U.S. bases in Japan and Japanese host nation support, as well as regional security issues. Secretary Tillerson will also meet bilaterally with Foreign Minister Kono August the 17th to discuss other regional and global issues. The 2+2 meeting will focus on how the United States and Japan can coordinate their response to the evolving regional security environment and strengthen their bilateral security and defense cooperation. And with that, I will take your questions, and I'll defer to my colleague here who's going to help facilitate and call on you. And I'd like to know more about who you all are and who you represent as well.
Great. Before we start, just a reminder to please state your name and your media outlet. So why don't we start here with Bing Ru.
Hi. Good to see you over here in another building.
Yes. My question is regarding China and India. We know President Trump and Indian Prime Minister Modi actually talked 14th, and also Secretary Tillerson also called the Foreign Minister of India. And both leaders, they actually agreed to establish a new 2x2 ministerial dialogue. Could you please elaborate about on the purpose of this dialogue? And also, Indian press is reporting that...
Let's get to your first one, because this is going to be a pretty quick answer for you, okay? I'm not aware of any exact meetings that we have set up regarding that just yet. I know we have close cooperation, of course, with both countries. When we do have some meetings to announce on that, I will certainly bring you the information.
Okay, and also on this dialogue, not on the schedule or anything, but the purpose of this dialogue, also the timing. The Indian press is saying this dialogue actually was evoked by the emerging threat from China. I wonder if you could address this.
Yeah, I'm afraid I just don't have any information about any of these upcoming meetings, but I'll check with my colleagues, see if I've missed something in the process of preparing for today, and I'll get back with you on that, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for
Hi.
doing this.
And good to see you over here, too.
Good to see you as well. So I had a question about North Korea.
Okay.
And today, President Trump tweeted that Kim Jong-un made a wise decision not to launch missiles to Guam for now. And so it seems that the North Korea-U.S. tensions have been diffused somewhat. But on the 21st, we're going to have the joint military exercise, the South Korea-U.S. Military exercises, and that has always raised tensions. So is there consideration, or will there be a scaling back of these exercises? If not, is the U.S. considering to do something to make sure that the situation doesn't boil over?
So part of what you're referring to, the joint exercises that we routinely conduct with many of our allies around the world. Some countries have called for what we call a double freeze. Basically, if the United States stops doing its joint military exercises, then maybe we'll get something out of the DPRK, better cooperation from them. These military exercises are conducted all around the world. It's under the purview of the Department of Defense, not the State Department. However, we will continue to conduct our joint military exercises. That would be a Department of Defense question. If there are any changes to the tempo of those joint military exercises, that's just not something that I can comment on.
And then just to go back on my question.
Yeah.
So is state going to do something to diffuse the tension or not?
Well, diffuse the tension in terms of what? In terms of
Between the North and the United States, because it's been ratcheting up pretty high.
Well, I think the entire world has called upon the DPRK to cease its destabilizing activities. That includes 2 ICBM tests in less than a month, 2 nuclear tests. We can't forget about that. That took place last year. So the United States, of course, talking with members of the UN Security Council. They had the unanimous vote about a week and a half ago. China saying that it will commit to fully enforcing the sanctions against the DPRK. This is not the United States versus the DPRK. This is the world looking at North Korea and saying what you are doing, the progress that they are making toward nuclear weapons and also the ballistic missiles testing is destabilizing not just for the region but the entire world. The entire world is concerned about this, whether it be our NATO allies or our closest neighbors here in the United States to our friends in Asia as well. Okay.
Let's go to the gentleman right here and
Thank you. Tuna Sanli from Turkish Radio Television, state
are you?
broadcaster.
How are you, sir?
How are you? Thank you very much.
And
And you?
you would be an example of somebody I talked about doing, taking risks in your work as we followed what has happened to journalists in Turkey.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I have two quick questions about the region. One is that the U.S. is sending weapons to the Kurdish groups, which have been regarded as terrorists by Turkey. First of all, how are you monitoring these weapons, and will you collect back these weapons from these groups? And connecting with this question, there are reports that the United States will conduct an operation to Idlib. And will this operation open a path or a way to PYD, which also have been considered as terrorists by Turkey?
Let me start with your first question first. I think what you are referring to are the Syrian Democratic Forces, an organization that the U.S. and our coalition partners work with in Syria. We partnered well with them, the coalition did, in taking back Raqqa, and that operation is still underway, and look forward to, as we are able to get more humanitarian aid back into Raqqa and all of that. What you're referring to in terms of that particular program is a very specific program designed, and this is more of a DoD issue, but I can just tell you a little bit about it, a program designed to help take back Raqqa from ISIS. That is a program there. It is being closely monitored by the Department of Defense, and that's all I'm going to be able to get into about that. And then your second question was what again?
About Idlib, referendum on the northern Iraq. Secretary to Education talked with Barzani and demanded a postponement of this referendum. But beyond the postponement, there are arguments that this referendum will affect
The referendum on Kurdish independence. That's what you're speaking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Will affect the region negatively, the stability in the region. So what does State Department thinks on this referendum
Right.
in general?
So we followed this issue very closely. I've spent time in Iraq as a reporter, myself, and in Erbil specifically. So understand the issues and understand what the Kurds are looking to do. We welcome the ongoing dialogue between Erbil and Baghdad. The United States, however, on this issue of a referendum, even a non-binding referendum, we've been clear that we strongly oppose that planned September 25th referendum on Kurdish independence. And here's why. We say to the Iraqi people, let's keep the eye on the ball. American expression here. That means let's keep focused. Let's stay focused on the biggest battle at hand, and that is the battle against ISIS. We have had When I say we, the Iraqi government, backed by U.S. and coalition forces, have had success in getting ISIS out of Mosul. We've started to see 300,000 people or more have returned to eastern Mosul. Western Mosul, people are starting to be able to return back there. We do not feel at this time that it is right to take our eye off that focus. We know the terrorism that ISIS has brought to the country of Iraq. We have all experienced, the vast majority of us have, from our various countries, experienced the terrorism that ISIS has put upon many free societies, and we want to see that done away with before going on to anything else. So let me just leave it at that. I want to be able to get around to a lot of other folks. I know you have a lot of questions. And let's please try to keep our questions by region, please, so that we don't have so much of a bouncing ball back and forth. Okay.
So let's go with the young lady in the red.
Hi, my name is Sahar and I'm from the Voice of America, South Asia Division. My question is about the Hezbollah Mujahideen terrorist organization in Kashmir. So the State Department has officially designated this organization as a terrorist group. So what prompted the U.S. State Department for this decision, and how is it going to impact this organization's members and its activities?
Okay. That was something that was just designated today, I believe, right? Yes. So just let me give you a little bit of background on that for folks who have not been following it that closely. We have two parts to this. The first came out on June the 26th, and that's when the United States and the State Department designated senior leader Saeed Salhadoun as a specially designated global terrorist, SDGT, under an executive order put forth here in the United States. Today, the new news is that the Department of State has designated Hizbul Mujahideen as a foreign terrorist organization under Section 219 of the Immigration and Nationality Act. Now, that authorizes our Secretary of State to designate a group as a foreign terrorist organization if it engages in terrorism or retains the capability and intent to engage in terrorism, and the activity threatens the security of U.S. nationals or national security of the United States. Okay?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Nazira Azim Karimi. I'm an Afghan independent journalist, but this question for Omid 24.
Okay. Hi, Nazira.
Thank you.
See you.
Any update about the U.S. new strategies toward Afghanistan? And also people want to know about the new like private company, Blackwater, how much it will be useful and work for Afghanistan solution.
Okay. Let me start with your second question first, and that is questions about whether or not a U.S. defense company will be engaged in Afghanistan. I don't have anything for you on that. I know there are a lot of conversations that are underway about what our Afghan policy should be. Our Afghan review policy, as many of you know, is still underway at this time. The president has looked at this and said, nothing's worked in the 16 years that we've been in Afghanistan. Although we have nearly 10,000 U.S. forces serving there right now, our forces, the Afghan people, have not been forgotten. That is an important issue for us, and that's why the president has asked for a full review of our Afghan policy. I don't want to get ahead of the president or where they're going to come down on that policy, but I know there are a lot of conversations underway. There are intense conversations about the right direction that the U.S. believes that it should take going forward in Afghanistan. When we have more on that, I'll bring it to you.
Great. Okay. I think we will go to our New York Foreign Press Center.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Hi, this is New York, Manik Mehta, syndicated journalist. A question in regard to your bilateral meeting with the Japanese tomorrow.
Okay.
2-on-2.
Okay.
There is talk of reviving the TPP in some quarters in Japan. How realistic is this proposition? And secondly, the president is going to be participating at the East Asia Summit this year. What will be his priorities there?
Well, that's a good question. I don't speak for the president about what his priorities will be at his upcoming meetings where you mention. So I'm just not familiar with what his priority will be to discuss. You also ask about TPP and whether or not that will come up between the meetings with Secretary Tillerson, General Mattis, or Secretary Mattis rather, and their counterparts. I'm not sure if that's going to be on the agenda. We have a full schedule of meetings tomorrow, and as I get more information on what will take place in those meetings and what the topics of conversation will be, we can certainly get back to you with those answers. I know one one of the key things that we will address, of course, with Japan, our ally tomorrow, will be the situation in the DPRK and concerns that we have about the security situation there. So I think that that will probably be the top issue that will be discussed tomorrow, but I don't want to get ahead of those meetings either.
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
Jeff Lu from Xinhua News. So I actually have two questions. Last weekend, the former director of national intelligence, James Clapper, he told CNN that, and I quote, he doesn't think a denuclearized DPRK is in the cards. And I quote, he said, he thinks our process ought to be on accepting it and trying to cap it or control it. What is your comment on that?
Well, let me first mention this, that he's the former, no longer serving the U.S. government in that kind of capacity. Secretary Tillerson, along with his administration, have been clear that we will not accept a nuclearized North Korea. There's no one who knows those threats better than the neighbors of North Korea. The United States shares the concerns that our Japanese and that our South Korean allies all face, okay, the security threat of North Korea. We do not believe that there is a place for a nuclearized North Korea, and let me just leave it at that.
Okay. Last week you said the United States is actually on the same page on DPRK, how to handle DPRK. And this morning, Mr. Trump just tweeted, he said Kim Jong-un made a well-reasoned and wise decision to back off from the launching. Does it mean the U.S. State Department share the same feeling because you are in the same
I don't think there's anyone in the U.S. government or anyone in the world who would like to see the DPRK go forward with its threats to do anything to U.S. territories or any other nation or ally of ours. So we are certainly on the same page. No one wants what the DPRK has threatened.
Let's go to Egypt. Thomas?
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
This is Thomas Gorgisyan from Al Ahram, Egypt.
My colleague Robert over here served in Egypt at the State Department. So.
Nice to meet you. My first question is regarding, do you have any update regarding U.S. policy toward designation or naming Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization? That it's an issue raised by Egypt and other Arab countries?
I do not. No, I'm afraid I don't have anything on that for you today.
So as long as you don't have anything, I can ask a second
You
question.
can. You may ask me a second question. Yes, I hope I have an answer for you.
Do you have any readout for the trip that retired General Zinni and Assistant Secretary did to head meeting in the Gulf states regarding the dispute ongoing dispute between Qatar and Arab Gulf countries?
So I don't have a readout of all the actual meetings and everything that took place. I'm glad you asked me about that because that has not received enough attention these days. We are now in the 11th or 12th week, I believe it is, of the Qatar dispute. And that is something that Secretary Tillerson has remained extremely engaged in, so much so that he said, you know what, all the trips that he's been on, the dozens of phone calls that he has had with our friends in the region, with his counterparts, is going to require even more work than he's able to do. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world today as we talk about DPRK. So the Secretary designated General Zinni and also our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Near East Affairs, Tim Lenderking, to go over to the region. They flew around and they had a whole lot of meetings. We have looked at that situation and we have called it a stalemate, meaning that there's basically nothing happening. We're not making progress. And when I say we, just as American observers, America has asked that the countries, that the parties sit down together and actually have a direct dialogue. We feel that having a direct dialogue, which the Secretary is happy to facilitate, we've been encouraging that all along, but a direct dialogue can best contribute to a resolution, and we hope that a resolution will come soon. We all recognize, as in at the Riyadh summit, that the focus should be on terrorism. The longer that this dispute drags out, the more it could potentially take eyes off the very serious regional security threats. So we hope that those countries will sit down. We are optimistic. We're not giving up hope yet, but we would encourage them to have those conversations directly. Thank you, sir.
Great. So why don't we go to the young lady in the back in the sweater? Yes.
Hi.
I'm Lucia Leal with EFE. It's a Spanish newswire.
Oh, yes. Hi. How are you?
I have two questions
Okay.
on Venezuela. First, last week President Trump said he doesn't rule out a military action in Venezuela, and Secretary Tillerson was there by his side. I wanted to know if he spoke about it with President Trump and if he believes that a military threat can undermine the U.S. efforts to find a diplomatic resolution in the region. And also, the Venezuelan...
Let me answer your
Okay,
first question
thanks.
first, if I may. Too many questions tend to confuse me, so let's stick with the first one. You asked about military options in the president's comments for Venezuela. As many of you know, our vice president is in South America, I believe he is today, right? So the vice president has been there, and he's spoken very forcefully, as have we from the State Department, about our continued concerns about the direction that Venezuela has gone. Look, Venezuela has been in the past a democracy. We see the Constituent Assembly that was drummed up, we believe, as a way to enable President Maduro to stay in longer, circumvents democracy. And that is a huge concern for the United States and democracy-loving countries around the world. The Vice President has spoken about this, and he firmly believes that our parties, our friends in the region, can best help to push to encourage Venezuela to return to its democracy. We are not recognizing the Constituent Assembly. In fact, we refer to it as the illegitimate Constituent Assembly. We believe that the legitimate government body there is the National Assembly. The United States, and sadly, so many Venezuelans aren't able to listen to or hear the concerns of Americans and also other concerned parties around the world. Many Venezuelans have been taking to Twitter and getting what information they can from there. I want it to be clear that our hearts, our prayers go out to the Venezuelan people. They have been put through far too much, starting to see food shortages, medicine shortages, and that is simply because of the greed of the Venezuelan government, the greed of Maduro, and we have seen in the past 6 or 8 months of this administration sanctions placed not only on Maduro, but some of his cronies as well.
Can you say whether the Secretary spoke about this with President Trump before he made the statement?
Well, I know that the President, along with Secretary Tillerson, we've all had lots of conversations about the concerns in Venezuela. I met with the Vice President's office just last week. Part of the reason that the Vice President went down to the region is to express his concerns about the dissolution of democracy in Venezuela. That is something that we care very passionately about, and we will continue to encourage partners in the region to encourage the Maduro regime to get back to free and fair elections, and that's the only way that we're going to see the situation change there. Thank you. Ms., we've got a lot of regions that we have to cover. Hi. Oh, yes, please go right ahead. What's your name? I'm sorry, I just don't.
The Venezuelan opposition is divided on whether to run for the regional elections together or not. I would like to know what you think about it, what Secretary Tillerson thinks about it.
I'm not exactly sure. I haven't asked him that specific question. When we are able to sit down and have a conversation about that, that's something I'll ask him. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. This is Jahazeh Wali from Airway News TV. The Undersecretary of State, Alice Wells, just came back from Pakistan. And can you just tell us what kind of discussions were held there to bring peace in the region? And secondly, you just talked about the Afghan policy, and you just said that it's under review. You said like a couple of weeks ago that military option is not the only option in Afghanistan. So what kind of efforts are being initiated to bring the Taliban or other stakeholders on the table with other countries? Thank you so much.
So as you mentioned, Alice Wells, our acting assistant secretary, just returned from the region, where she was in Pakistan, she was in India, and I believe she may have been in Afghanistan as well. I know that was her first initial trip in this position in order to talk with people and learn more about some of their priorities and their thoughts. Beyond that, I've not had a chance to sit down and talk with her specifically about what she learned and what our plan is. As you well know, our Afghan review policy is underway, as is our Pakistan review policy. I don't want to get ahead of those. I don't want to get ahead of where the administration is going to come down because those conversations are still ongoing.
Let's go to the first row.
Okay. Dimitri.
Hi, Heather.
Where have you been? We haven't seen you over at the State Department.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be there next week. But
You will,
Welcome,
okay.
welcome here.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks a lot to the FPC for arranging this.
Okay. You haven't been out of DACA, though, have you?
I'm sorry?
You haven't been out of DACA, though, have you?
Dacha.
Dacha, that's
No,
right, that's
you-
right, okay.
You didn't allow me to do that. Come on.
Otherwise, we would know where to find you. Go right ahead.
Listen. I wanted to ask you about your upcoming, well, slightly different. The U.S. government has already warned that it's going to answer by September the 1st to the measures taken by the Russian government, which demanded that the U.S. Reduce its diplomatic presence in Russia. Are the two sides right now taking any measures to minimize the fallout that's going to be inevitable, I think, come September the 1st?
So I know that Secretary Tillerson spoke with his counterpart not long ago at the ASEAN conference. I think that that was a good start. As we have talked about many times here before, when this administration came in earlier this year, we looked at our relationship with Russia and said, this is at a low point. We are two nuclear powers, and two nuclear powers can't exist well in this world without having some sort of a relationship. We have been able to start to forge ahead in finding areas of mutual agreement and mutual cooperation. One area in which we are cooperating fairly well together is in a certain part of Syria, and that's where a ceasefire was declared about 5 or 6 weeks ago or so. And so that is an area where, fortunately, we've been able to have that ceasefire for the most part take hold and still stand. And humanitarian aid has started to be able to come into that area, and we're pleased with that. We're very pleased with that. We're taking that point and starting to build upon it. Make no mistake, our countries have a lot of areas of disagreement. Where we don't have areas of agreement, we will continue to forcefully advance American interests and security goals. But we are building off that point from the very beginning. We have multiple lines of communication with the Russian government, and I'll just leave it at that for now. Okay. Yeah.
Alicia Rose with NHK. The U.S. has said previously that stopping provocative threats and actions are a condition before the U.S. is willing to sit down with North Korea and negotiate. So does the president's tweet that was mentioned earlier that Kim Jong-un made a very wise and well-reasoned decision suggest that the U.S. is closer to such negotiations?
We discussed this. You were at the briefing yesterday, right? We discussed this yesterday. We covered it yesterday. The United States is willing to sit down, with North Korea and have a conversation. But we are not anywhere near that point yet. And that is because North Korea has not stopped its destabilizing activities. A good point would be a good show of faith, a good show of goodwill would be to stop nuclear testing, to stop ballistic missile testing, to stop destabilizing activities in the region. That would be a good starting point. But as we've seen, they're not anywhere close to that point yet. Okay, I think we're going to take the last question.
Last question.
Thank you. Thank you,
Hi,
Heather.
sir.
John San with CTI TV of Taiwan.
Hi.
Have an easy question for you that is not very much in the news.
Okay. This is you're going to really try to stump me here, aren't you? Okay.
The 2018 defense authorization bills of both houses of Congress contain a request that U.S. warships return to Taiwan for port calls. What is the State Department's position on this?
So I think what you're referring to there would actually be a Department of Defense matter, the United States, we remain fully committed to the Taiwan Relations Act, as you well know. That has not changed, and that will not change. We have an enduring interest in cross-strait peace and stability. That has not changed. That won't change. We encourage the authorities to Beijing and Taipei to engage in constructive dialogue that seeks a peaceful resolution of differences that are acceptable to people of both sides of the Taiwan Strait.
So
I hope that answers your question.
It's both defense and foreign policy, the protocols. Do you have a position on that?
Let me just go back to saying this, that we remain fully committed to the Taiwan Relations Act. Department of Defense does take a stake in that, and so I don't want to step on their toes. Okay? Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you again, and thanks for coming in today.